Good evening once again. I'm Ali Velshi in for Brian Williams. Day 106 of the Biden administration. We now have a major escalation in the battle for control of the Republican Party. Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney has gone beyond just publicly challenging former President Trump over his false claims of a stolen 2020 election. Tonight, she's framing her criticism as a fight for the future of democracy in this nation. In an opinion piece for the Washington Post, Cheney draws a direct line from Trump to the January 6th riot and calls on her party to reject Trumpism. She writes, quote, Trump is seeking to unravel critical elements of our constitutional structure that make democracy work. Confidence in the result of elections and the rule of law. No other American president has ever done this. In the immediate wake of the violence of January 6th, almost all of us knew the gravity and the cause of what had just happened. We had witnessed it firsthand. History is watching. Our children are watching. We must be brave enough to defend the basic principles that underpin and protect our freedom and our democratic process. I am committed to doing that, no matter what the short-term political consequences may be, end quote. Among the possible consequences, Liz Cheney's removal as chair of the House Republican Conference, the party's third most powerful post in that chamber. She's now under siege and calling out Trump. And today, Steve Scalise, the second most powerful House Republican, has joined the minority leader Kevin McCarthy in backing Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York to replace Cheney. Former President Trump agrees, today issuing a statement calling Stefanik, quote, a far superior choice, and she has my complete and total endorsement for GOP conference chair. She responded on Twitter thanking Trump for his 100% support. This afternoon, President Biden was asked about the implications of ousting Liz Cheney from her post in the House.
They're in the midst of a significant sort of mini revolution going on in the Republican Party. We badly need a Republican Party. We need a two-party system. It's not healthy to have a one-party system. And I think the Republicans are further away from trying to figure out who they are and what they stand for.
Meanwhile, the Republican leader in the Senate made a point of avoiding any kind of response about the situation in his party.
Are you going to do anything to help her keep her leadership position? And are you concerned at the overall kind of trend in the Republican Party that acknowledging that the election is valid can threaten, I guess, your position of power?
Yeah, 100% of my focus is on stopping this new administration.
Isn't it a concern that a sizable chunk of the Republican base doesn't believe that this election was valid?
100% of my focus is on standing up to this administration.
Congress shall make no law, David Jolly. The First Amendment actually speaks about Congress. But what Congress is doing right now, or at least Republicans in Congress, they are attempting to silence the speech of Congresswoman Cheney, who has said what a lot of people believe, that Donald Trump instigated much of what happened on January 6th. This has elevated into a very serious matter for Republicans. It actually now threatens the structure and fabric of the Republican Party in Congress.
Yeah, it does, Ali. And it's easy to take the Liz Cheney, Kevin McCarthy story as just one more moment of outrage since Donald Trump has taken his grip on the Republican Party. But I do think this is a moment, this is an inflection point where we kind of have to apply the long lens of political history and recognize that this is answering the question that many of us had, though I think we anticipated the answer. What would a post-Trump GOP look like? Would you see Republican leaders emerge and try to bring the party back just a little bit from Trumpism? This is the moment where we know that is not to be the case, that the House Republican Conference, the Congressional Caucus of Republicans, is prepared to oust one of their own leaders over her refusal to accept Donald Trump's big lie, and in fact, to go further, her condemnation of his behavior that got him impeached. And the greatest tell of all tonight is that Elise Stefanik, apparently the heir apparent to replace Liz Cheney, is far less conservative by her voting record than Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is the more conservative candidate. The difference is Elise Stefanik has agreed, even as a moderate Republican, to be a lapdog for Donald Trump. And that is the single qualifier that makes her eligible to be elevated in the Republican conference, just as they're prepared to kick out Liz Cheney.
This is a very interesting point for people who don't know Elise Stefanik. She has voted not along lines of President Trump more often than most Republicans have not. She's taken stands that definitely are to the left or not to the right of Liz Cheney. Carol Leonnig, I want to read a little bit from what Liz Cheney wrote today. She wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post in which she is not shying away from her position. She writes, "I am a conservative Republican, and the most conservative of conservative values is reverence for the rule of law. At the heart of our republic is a commitment to the peaceful transfer of power among political rivals in accordance with the law. President Ronald Reagan described this as our American miracle. There is much at stake now, including the ridiculous wokeness of our political rivals, the irrational policies at the border, and runaway spending that threatens a return to the catastrophic inflation of the 1970s. Carol, that last sentence there is the only concession that Liz Cheney made to fighting the left. The bottom line is most of her op-ed, which was published in the Washington Post, was really a criticism of Republicans.
Well, yes, Allie, but also it's a full-hearted embrace of what the Republican Party was. What the Republican Party was not anybody who promised endless fealty to Donald Trump, the former president, the 45th president, who still refers to himself as the president of the United States in his statements. Fealty to Donald Trump was not the measure of what the Republican Party was. And it's sort of, I think the inflection point that Dave points out is exactly apt. The other thing that's striking and chilling, really, about Liz Cheney's statement is her point. History is watching. If we're not going to be able to be truthful with voters, if Republican candidates and elected leaders are not going to be able to be truthful about what happened in the election, then really, where are we? What's fascinating is McCarthy has chosen endlessly since the departure of President Trump to support him and back him. We know from reporting that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is pretty fed up with Donald Trump trying to giddy up, harness this Republican Party and take it for his own. And yet, even today, you see Senate Majority McConnell basically dodging this question because so many voters, so many people still believe the trumpet call of Donald Trump. 7 out of 10 Republican voters believe the election was rigged, even though the Donald Trump administration's top experts in election security said that it was the most secure in history. And they audited it and verified it. It was Donald Trump's own experts in his Department of Homeland Security who verified this. And the fact that Republican lawmakers are willing to continue saying this is what has Liz Cheney in such a bind.